Greetings everyone, and welcome to my MVP Days, Azure Days presentation today, the cool tools in Azure Security Center. When I wrote the abstract for this session, some people will say, hey, you're not supposed to have any PowerPoint slides. Well, I've only got a couple because I have to actually introduce myself, and I'm not really sure how to accomplish all that without having some kind of a slide. So my name is Mike Nelson. You can reach me at any of these avenues here that you see. The best way is probably on Twitter, at NellMedia. You can also reach me at my email at mike@mikenelson.io. I am a Microsoft MVP, of course, in Cloud and Data Center, and I'm also an Azure User Group Leader along with a couple of Citrix and VMware Community Awards as well. The picture you see up on right is actually my family, and the latest vacation we took to Aruba, where we had a fantastic time. So, just so you know, there are no more slides. We're going to get right to the demo. So hang tight, and we'll switch over to the demo. We're going to start in the Azure Portal UI here when we take a look at the ASC, or the Azure Security Center. One of the things I need to talk about first off, though, is that the Azure Security Center is really more of a, it's a tool. It contains tools that can be used inside of it, but it's also like an aggregation point for other services in Azure to bring their data into. So, and what I mean by that is Azure Security Center will take data from log analytics, and it'll take event logs and sys logs and NSG logs and network watcher logs and all kinds of stuff. It'll take all that data that's presented to it. It will apply algorithms and calculations against it to provide security recommendations and be able to provide investigations and mapping and remediation and mitigation, if you will, against security flaws and events and attacks and so on and so forth. So don't think of it as just a single tool. It really isn't. It's a whole combination of a bunch of tools that interact with services within Azure. So this is an actual dashboard that we get into. Most of you are probably familiar with creating your own dashboard. But one thing I wanted to point out is from the security tiles is being able to bring that data from the Security Center into these tiles. And you can do that pretty easily. I'll show this when I get into it a little bit deeper, but wherever you see a little picture, an icon of a push pin with the word pin next to it, you can click on that, and one of the options will be pin to dashboard. It'll ask you what dashboard, and then it'll pin it directly to that dashboard. So it really helps you create dashboards that give you the vision into your environment, the immediate look that you want to see. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that while we're in here in the portal, and if we go into Security Center, that this is just one way to get at the Security Center. You need to understand that there also is a PowerShell module for the Security Center called AZ Security. And if you do automation, if you do DSC, you do any kind of programmability through APIs or templating or anything like that, I highly encourage you to look at the AZ Security module and utilize that for your scripting and automation needs. I use a little bit of both from an administration standpoint, depending on the need. I'll actually use them at the same time because one is a little bit more flexible than the other in terms of speed and being able to do multiple things very quickly rather than clicking around. But that's really up to you, your comfort level, and how you do your work. So from the Security Center standpoint, when we go into it, you're going to see the Informational Blade, the Overview Blade as they call it. Now, this blade was just redesigned not too long ago. I'm sure they'll redesign it again in another, weeks, months, whatever. But the speed at which things change inside of Azure, or any public cloud for that matter, may cause this to, look different by the time you watch this video. It's all relevant to the timestamp of this video. So what they have here is they have a culmination of different areas that really need focus when you're looking at security. One is policy and compliance, resource security hygiene, and finally threat protection. Now, there's really nothing unusual from this standpoint when you look at this blade. I mean, it is like a standard dashboard blade. You can pretty much click anywhere on it and be able to drill down into the data, which we'll do here in a second. But it also gives you an option on the right-hand side. You'll notice on the right-hand side there's a little bit of markdown there. And the markdown can be active or it's just textual. So it's just telling you, hey, you want to learn more about this, click here on the regulatory compliance. But it also allows you to take a look at actual data. So if I'm looking at this, it actually allows me to look at most attacked resources. SQL servers are 35 alerts. This particular server got 132 alerts. If I click one more time, it gives me even more data. It says most prevalent alerts. Traffic from unrecommended IP addresses was detected. Access from unusual locations, okay, to a storage account, which is new, protecting storage accounts or providing security around storage accounts and looking into it from a prevention or a proactive point of view is a little bit newer on the Azure aspect of things. Suspicious authentication activity. It's very quick to go through and be able to look at these things. Now, that doesn't mean that these aren't going to change, but it's kind of cool that you can just, quickly go in there and click and be able to look at this. So I'm going to take a look real quick at the traffic from the unrecommended IPs. And if we were to pick one of the latest one here, there were 34 attempts on this. And once it comes up here and shows me the data from those attempts, you'll see that it actually shows you the attacked resource, how many times it was attacked, the activity time, all the pertinent data that you need in order to take a look at what happened and start to lay out a timeline of how a security incident occurred. So if we click on this app 03, it'll actually tell you detected incoming traffic from an IP address which has been identified as maybe a bad actor. Of course, they're coming in RDP on 3389, and these are all the IPs that try to access it. Now, obviously, this is going to be an attack, right? This is something that is pretty common. One of the things I do want you to notice down here is the remediation steps. The remediation steps will actually tell you what you can do, but if you just click the enforce rule, it'll automatically go out there and do it for you. It'll take care of what you need to do in order to enforce the rule to stop this from happening again. Now, two of the buttons down here I'm going to show you a little bit later. One is investigation and the other one is a view playbooks. I'm going to not get into those right now, but I'll show you them a little bit later. Just keep those in mind. We'll finally go back to the overview. I'm going to take a look at the access from unusual locations. Now, this is going to show me, specific to storage accounts. Now, if you've noticed over the last, a couple of years, cloud storage accounts have become targets. They really have, even for bad actors, ransomware, malware, you name it. People have been going after storage now and pulling that storage data out and then, selling it for ransom or distributing it on the dark web, what have you. So if we click on that access from an unusual location, this will come up and tell me, hey, these are just diagnostic accounts, so it's not a big deal. But if you were to click on it, it'll actually tell me, okay, someone accessed it. This is actually how they accessed it via the Azure Storage Explorer, and this is the IP address, and they came in from Dublin, Ireland. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad situation or it's an attack. It may be a false positive, but it gives you more information. It helps you understand the situation better. Now you'll notice this one actually has the investigate available and the playbooks. Okay, I can click on the remediation steps. It'll tell me the view, the related storage activity, analytics logging, see how to configure storage, all that kind of fun stuff. And I can click investigate. Now, this isn't going to tell me a lot, so I'm not going to do that. It's just going to show me, where it came from, but it's not a lot of data. I'm going to show you a much more detailed one here in a few minutes. Suspicious activity, if I were to go into there, Same thing. Pretty much going to tell you it tried to go after a SQL server. Again, investigate is available. It tried to come in as SQL admin, tried to use 17 different accounts, non-existent accounts, to log in. You can actually generate a report of brute force. If I generate that report, this is actually a report that you can use to describe what an actual brute force attack is, which is really good to send to your security team or to send to a CSIO, whoever that needs to understand what type of attack it was. Now, I am going to click on the investigate here. And what this does is this brings you into a dashboard preview. It's probably not going to be preview by the time you watch this video or later on, because it's been in preview for a little while. But what this is going to do is this is going to bring up a mapping of the different objects that are involved. I call them objects, they call them entities. But it brings up a mapping, as you can see, of the different entities and how they are tied together and how they relate to the actual incident. You'll see that it's growing here. It's actually expanding. And the reason is because it's going through the logs and it's trying to understand how everything happened, how everything was talking to each other or correlated with each other while this attack was happening, or while the suspicious activity was happening. I don't want to call it an attack, it's just suspicious activity. And you can see here, it actually gives you the details of what it can on that activity. All right, even gives you the remediation. But you can drill down a little bit. So say I wanted to go directly to the SQL server, and if I drill down on that, it'll expand out, okay, even more of the resources that were, referenced during this activity. And it'll say, hey, they try to use domain login, so I'm going to include the domain controllers here because maybe there's something wrong with your domain controllers. And if you click on the domain controller, it'll actually bring up everything that's tied to that domain controller. You see how this is ever expanding as it's dynamic. It goes out and it tries to relate everything possible that you should be looking at in an investigation. So if I go into the actual exploration of that, this is where it comes up and it tells me, hey, this domain controller, you got a lot of missing security updates. You really should apply those. There are rarely used processes, okay, on this box. This is from an investigation standpoint, a root cause and effect. This is really a unique way and a very informative way to gather this information to provide an analysis and a complete investigation around some activity. So that's just one. You can zoom in here. You can concentrate specifically if you wanted to on a particular account. It'll just tell you it's a domain account. Then it'll go back out and here's the actual event as it happened. We go back there and it'll close it back up. And here's the actual investigation itself that we've started. You can actually expand on this as well. You can do audit on it. You can create comments. All right, kind of cool. All right. From there also, just so you know, you can drill into the logs if you like. This goes into the logs that's actually generating this information. If I were to click here, you can see it's basically going to allow you to query whatever resources that were inside of this investigation. Now, what I want you to see here is that I've just launched this, but this is actually a separate service in Azure. This is the Log Analytics workspace. This is the workspace itself. So you'll see from ASC, okay, it actually aggregates data from different services like I mentioned earlier. And now I'm in Log Analytics, but I'm still within the Security Center. But I can do anything that Log Analytics can do. So if I wanted to see, hey, I'm going to jump over here and take a look at memory and CPU usage for all my machines, I can run that query. I can go in and take a look at any kind of data that's within this Log Analytics workspace, all this data here. Now, a little one term about thing about these this query language. If you're not familiar with this, this is a Custo query language. It's pretty simple, but if you're anything like me, I have a real hard time with syntax. I screw it up all the time. I really, apostrophes and quotes and parentheses and brackets and all kinds of funky stuff really kind of throws me off every once in a while. So what they have here, you can learn Cusco, right? You can learn that query language, but they also have something that I think people miss, and this is another cool tool, is the Query Explorer. If you go into the Query Explorer, they have solution queries. They're samples. If I click here, you can see all of these samples. So if I wanted to, I could go into like change tracking, and I want to take a look at all the configuration changes that happen to the VMs over time. It's going to give you the query language that it's going to use, and I can just click run. It'll bring back all the changes that happen. Very simply, I can drill into this. It can tell me what changes. There was a change. It was a modified. It was a daemon that was modified. The NFS config was stopped. Okay, so the point I'm trying to get across, though, is the solution queries cover a bunch of different things: anti-malware, general exploration, which could include distribution of data types, stale computers, security, log management, so on and so forth, SQL assessment, even wire data. I really can't emphasize enough how beneficial this can be for the somewhat syntax challenged folks like myself, because this kind of generates the code for you, and it's really kind of cool. It's pre-made. It's kind of like going out and downloading the code that's already done and utilizing that. You can also save your queries, and this is where this pin comes in. So notice this little one right here. If I click on pin, this particular query will get pinned to my dashboard. So I can go ahead and select any dashboard, and it'll pin it directly to it. So this is what you're looking for to add those things to your dashboard. This is just another cool thing that you can do, is just generate a new rule right off of one of the alerts that you got in Security Center off the recommendation, and boom, you've got a new alert that'll tell you when that particular event happens, that particular malicious activity or whatever happens. So now I'm going to actually jump back over to back to the Security Center, and I'm going to click on the Resource Security Hygiene portion of this. Now, this just kind of breaks down the resources and the different levels of, recommendations, the high, the mediums, and the lows. And one of the things I do want to show you here is another aspect of how the data is aggregated. I'm going to click on here when it says remediate vulnerabilities and security configuration on your machines. This is just an example. If I were to click on that, it would bring up everything that happened, okay, on those machines, but it also ties it to a CCE ID, which is really kind of important in the security world. All right, so that's really something to remember. Now, there are 17 VMs that were affected by this run audit D service, okay, in Linux. If I were to actually click on that and drill down even more, it's going to tell me run audit ID service, just like we saw. This is a CCE number, it's a critical, but now I can view all the affected machines. So it'll bring up everything that's inside of the, those machines. From those log aspects, these are all the machines and exactly what happened. Okay, so this particular machine right here, you can see that's the machine. It happened once on that. Yeah, and look at this query. I mean, I'd screw this up terribly. So that's really kind of cool to understand that when you go into things like that, you can drill and go deeper and deeper and finally get to the actual affected machines. I can't remember too long ago when that was really difficult to just be able to drill down and figure out what machine was doing what, because it was object IDs and eventually you got down to it, but now they make it a lot simpler. That's really neat. So I'm going to jump here a little bit, mainly due to time. I can't cover everything in this session, obviously, with ASE, but I do have some longer presentations that I'll be doing later in the year if you're interested, covering a much wider breadth of ASE and what it can do. But I'm going to jump down here to the events. Now, when people think of events, you usually think of it in the aspect of you're a systems admin or a data center admin. You're thinking of it from, hey, my Windows server has generated an event, a security event, application event, logon event. Well, this is kind of the same thing, but it's all the resources that are contained within your log analytics workspace. So if it's, applications, it's storage, it's virtual networks, it's compute resources, it's VMs, it's everything. Anything that generates an event. Now, if I were to click on my retail IT one, you can see this is an event over time. This is 7 days. And these are events as they come up by type. The Windows firewall, obviously, a lot of stuff hitting there, right, from an event perspective. You can look at wire data, which is from a network. Security events, which could be either Linux or Windows. Syslog, same thing. IS logs, DNS events. And this one is really kind of cool. Office activity. If you use Office 365 as a SaaS application or PaaS app, both, or however you utilize it, you can actually see from a security aspect all the Office activity that happens in ASC. And if you click on this, it's going to go out to what? It's going to go out to the log analytics workspace and run the query, basically looking at all the Office activity. And here you're looking, the Exchange admin set the transport config. The Exchange admin added a mailbox permission. That's kind of important when you're doing investigations. Hey, when did this person change the access to this mailbox so the user could not get into it? Or maybe someone got terminated and we had to turn off their mailbox, but we turned off the wrong one. How many times does that happen? So this is really a great way to quickly go in and see that information. Now, again, I can pin this to my dashboard and I can create an alert off of it. So this particular query, anything comes up that says, that they changed a mailbox permission from an Exchange admin role, I'd be able to get alerted on that. Really quick and simple. These are really cool things that you can do with this flexibility of these services. So I'm going to head back to the Security Center here. Now, under the resource security, you're going to see all the different things you can do. You can do storage now, by the way, just so you're aware. You can take a look at storage accounts, which is a little bit newer, kind of important nowadays with the, like I mentioned before, with the storage attacks. Identity and access, that's another one that's kind of big about, how many people are trying to get in, remove the external accounts, all that kind of stuff. So one thing I do want to hit here is the networking aspect under resource security hygiene. And the reason why I want to hit that is because it got really cool functionality in here I want to show you. The network map. If you click on that, it actually shows you a network mapping of all your resources and how they relate to other resources. But when you're looking at it from a security aspect, one thing that's really beneficial is to know how things are talking to each other. And you can do that from allowed traffic. So allowed traffic is dynamic, and if you go in to make changes to this machine can receive, on port whatever, it'll dynamically add that. But this allows you to see relationships between machines. And you can drill in here. If you click on a machine, you can actually see what the public IP is. You can go in and it'll give you a recommendation, harden the NSGs, do all that kind of fun stuff. And it's really kind of cool. If I were to zoom in here a little bit more and I go to a group, it actually has a group of virtual machines, and go into a virtual network. It'll actually tell me what can I do from a recommendation from a virtual network. So it's really kind of neat, the different things that you have the ability to do when you're looking at the topology of different things in your network through this interface. If I looked at just a topology and I picked a grouped resource, it tells you everything that is kind of grouped together. Really kind of cool stuff. Secure score and regulatory compliance. If I had more time, I would cover that, but there really isn't much there from an aspect of kind of what's cool. It really is an aspect of when you go in here, you can take a look and say, oh, these things aren't covered from a regulatory perspective. One thing you can do is you can generate a report, which you couldn't do not too long ago, which I have actually done and given to auditors. And it looks like this. This is the actual report that you can get out. But it's really important to know that you probably want to look at this report before you give it to an auditor, so you can come up with some remediation, if you will, or explanations on why some of the things show up on the report. Just-in-time access, I can't emphasize enough that people should be using that. If you're not familiar with that, I suggest you get familiar with it because it's a really secure way to access your VMs without having those ports open all the time. File integrity monitoring, I'll cover this quick because this is really neat. This allows you to track anomalies or changes to your file, so modifications, adds, deletes, things like that. Some people would think this is kind of like a, you could detect ransomware with this. Yeah, but it's really more of a basic type of detection, and it's also reactive. So there are a lot of third-party products out there that do a much better job at it, that do it on-prem and in the cloud, and they do it with a deeper neural type of machine learning rather than the higher level. So I would highly recommend that you look at those, but this is kind of cool because you can go in here and you can see any of the changes that happen to your files on a particular VM. So if I go into this VM, it'll tell me, it'll run the query again back in the log analytics. It'll tell me what files changed, who changed them if it's known, and at what time, so on and so forth. Kind of important when you're doing investigations. Finally, I'm going to cover something called the Security Alerts Map. The Security Alerts Map is really neat because you can go in here, you can see threats, okay, as they're happening. They show up here. Right now, I don't have any threats that are actually active at the moment, but you can go into the Security Events Map. And what this does is this shows you from a geographical point of view where your threats are coming from. So if I were to go into my retail IT here, I've had 14 malicious IPs. If I were to go in here, it'll tell me that I'm getting quite a bit from the Ukraine, okay, and they're botnets. There's 668 of them, and they've actually come in, they give me the IP address. I can change this. Let's change this to like 7 days, and you'll see this will just kind of blow up a little bit. Ukraine jumps up to 1,000 over 7 days. So that's really, really kind of interesting, all the different areas of the world that are trying to deploy botnets or trying to, be bad actors, if you will, in accessing your computers. This is actually one that I think that's an actual SSH. So they're trying to get in SSH from Indonesia. Okay, this is all part of the investigations, the tools that you can use for establishing your investigation and carrying on with it. And I kind of lied. I'm actually going to go back to one other thing, and that was the playbooks. I finally want to cover the playbooks. Playbooks, just so you understand, there was a button we can do an investigate, and then there was a playbooks. If you do a playbooks, you can actually create workflows off of events. And it's not like the doing like alerts. What it is it's actually integrating, again, logic apps, event hubs, all that other kind of stuff that's services in Azure, but it's executing them when something happens, when something gets triggered. Alerting is mainly for triggering alerts, right? When you get into playbooks, that's when you're integrating a bunch of different technologies into being able to remediate event, stop an event, investigate an event, what have you. So playbooks are kind of cool, and you should get to know them when you want to automate your mitigation and remediation. So just to close out my session, I would like to say thank you for allowing me to present to you and for listening to me babble on for a while. I hope you found it educational and you actually learned something. You'd like to open up discussions about something, please let me know. Get a hold of me at NowMedia on Twitter, or you can email me as well. Once again, thank you, Dave and Crystal. I really appreciate this, and I hope everyone has just a fantastic day.